The topic that we are dealing with today, mental health for faith communities. Just a personal word about this topic for me. It is very dear to my heart, having served on church staff as minister to children and families for almost 20 years. The shift in my ministry call to spiritually integrated psychotherapy came in response to the need seen in the local faith community. I noticed that faith congregants were in need, continue to be in need of therapists who are equipped to respect and work with the congregant's spiritual resources for their healing and growth. This background led me to the question that we are considering today in this topic. How can faith community leaders and mental health practitioners work together for the mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being of the people they serve? We recognize that faith community leaders are often the first point of contact when individuals and families face mental health problems or traumatic events. In fact, in times of crisis, many will turn to trusted leaders in their faith communities before they would consider turning to mental health professionals. We also recognize, it's just kind of generally communicated in our culture, that faith community leaders can join mental health professionals in educating individuals and families about mental health, about increasing awareness while reducing the stigma of mental health issues and making it easier for people to seek help. Community connectedness and support, like that found in healthy faith-based organizations, is very important to the long-term recovery of people living with mental illnesses. Faith communities are also in a unique position to reach many of the millions of Americans who struggle with serious thoughts of suicide each year. Many people having thoughts of suicide feel hopeless, trapped, or are in such emotional pain and despair that they struggle to face another day. Suicidal thoughts are often accompanied by a spiritual crisis or deepening questioning about the purpose of life. If faith leaders are better equipped to recognize the signs of suicide and learn how to respond, as well as the signs of other mental illness, they can serve as an expanded safety net for those most in need. So that's the reasoning that I thought this topic would serve us today. So in answering this question of how mental health communities and faith communities can link arms in service of persons in our communities that struggle with mental health, here are 4 areas that kind of summarized with the help of some particular websites I'll share at the end that we can work together in. I've already mentioned one of those areas, and that's the area of education. We can promote awareness by educating the members of our communities and congregations about the prevalence of mental health issues, even among people of faith. That prevalence is about the same across the population of the US, whether you're participating in a mental health community or not. Some statistics that are published on the NAMI website, National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI.org. Those statistics tell us that 1 in 5 adults in the US experience mental illness each year. 1 in 20 adults in the US experience serious mental illness each year. We'll talk a little bit about what that means later on. More than half of Americans report that COVID-19 has had a negative impact on their mental health. If you're in the mental health profession, you recognize this. If you're in a church staff position or leadership position in a local faith community, you recognize this. People have been struggling, and it has impacted anxiety and depression across our country, around the world even. A few more statistics. In February 2021, 43.5% of adults in Tennessee reported symptoms of anxiety or depression. That number of mental health condition in Tennessee, the actual number was 937,000 adults across the state. 252,000 adults in Tennessee have a serious mental illness. 1 in 6 youth in the US, age 6 to 17, experience a mental health disorder. In the state of Tennessee, just for the mental disorder of depression, 58,000 youth aged 12 to 17 experience that struggle. And how does this relate then, the mental health struggle, to faith communities? How can we see that they connect? Most people believe that spirituality and religion are relevant to their mental health. So that's one way they connect. A study done by Oxlander, Pargament, Pierce, Beaton, and Moffitt that was published in a social work volume in 2021 answered this question. They surveyed 989 adults in the US. 64% of those adults surveyed believed engaging in religious or spiritual practices improved their mental health. 60% believe spiritual or religious beliefs help them cope with mental health symptoms. 48% believe their mental health symptoms would not improve until they were religiously and spiritually healthy. An added footnote on these statistics, in a course that I teach for Insight on spiritually integrated psychotherapy training, in that course is embedded the information that the spirituality personally is a moderating impact on a person's mental health. It will reduce the impact of mental health if a person has a solid personal spiritual life going on with them. Just being part of a faith congregation that is without that active spiritual practice is not as impactful on the positive side. Just that side note. Some other things that we can do as we link arms with faith communities and mental health practitioners to educate our community, maybe would be invite mental health providers to share and speak with a congregation, speak at a community gathering, to open the conversation about mental health, mental wellness, mental distress, and mental illness. Exposure to mental health providers, and even exposure to those who have experienced mental illness and are finding paths to recovery can help demystify the whole process of mental illness. So talking about it intentionally by inviting people. Another way that can be a little fun, and I thought we would do this today, and I'm going to invite Abby to monitor the chat, is to share common facts and myths about mental health. So I'm going to read a statement for you and invite you that are participating to type in the chat whether you think this statement is fact or myth. I hope you'll participate and make this a little bit more fun and interactive. I'm not going to do that many. There's about 6 statements. So, fact or myth, mental health problems don't affect me. I'm going to give you a minute. Abby, you can let us know some of the responses you're getting.
So far, that's looking like a myth.
Well, absolutely, it is a myth. So the fact is, mental health problems are actually very common. And if you remember the statistics that I just shared with 1 in 5 American adults experiencing a mental health issue, that pretty much works out to about 1 in every 2 households is dealing with a mental health issue. 1 in 6 young people experiencing a major depressive episode could figure out to about every 1 or 2 or 3 households 1 in 20 Americans living with a serious mental illness, such as schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, major depression, panic disorder, those are considered serious mental illnesses. OCD is another one of those. 1 in 20 Americans living with that really means that about every 5 households to 7 households has someone that is directly affected with a serious mental illness. So that means in our communities, it could be in our family, it could be in our friend group, it could be in our faith congregation, it could be in our work group. We're going to interface with people that are struggling with mental issues, mental health issues. And another note about this fact that mental health problems are very common is that suicide is a leading cause of death in the United States. It is the second leading cause of death for people ages 10 to 24. Suicide is often accompanied by serious mental illness or by a mental health crisis. It accounted for the loss of more than 45,979 Americans in 2020. That's nearly double the number of lives lost to homicide. It is definitely a very common condition that is a brain condition for people that impact their whole personhood. I could go on. Let me stop. What's the next statement? Is this myth or is this fact? Half of all mental health disorders show first signs before a person turns 14 years old. Fact or myth? Half of all mental health disorders show first signs before a person turns 14.
A little bit split here. I think that the majority are saying that that is fact.
Okay. It is indeed a fact, and it does sound rather startling, doesn't it, that half of all mental health disorders show first signs before age 14. It is rather unsettling. Even very young children may show early warning signs of mental health concerns. These mental health problems are often clinically diagnosable and can be a product of the interaction of biological, psychological, and social factors. Unfortunately, only half of children and adolescents with diagnosable mental health problems receive the treatment they need. Early mental health support can help a child before problems interfere with the trajectory of their developmental needs and just the way their life will roll out. Early intervention is important. Here's the next statement. Personality weakness, character flaws, or faith deficits cause mental health problems. Fact or myth? Personality weaknesses, character flaws, or faith deficits cause mental health problems. What do you think?
Looks like the majority of people are saying that's a myth.
Well, it is, isn't it? People with mental health problems, a sister myth that goes along with this one about personality weakness, character flaws, or faith deficits causing mental health problems is also the myth people with mental health problems can snap out of it if they try hard enough. There are many factors that contribute to mental health problems, as we've been saying. Those biological factors could be genes, the genetic pool that the individual is made up of, physical illness that the individual has experienced, an injury, especially a brain injury, or brain chemistry. Those are biological factors that impact mental health problems. Life experiences such as trauma or a history of abuse also impact these mental health problems. They can actually impact the physical makeup of our brain. The younger trauma and history of abuse occurs, the more impact it has on how the brain structure rolls out and how the brain chemistry is set at its automatic level. Also, family history of mental health problems is an important factor. One could have the biological, the genes that would give them a propensity for mental illness, but not have that mental illness develop unless they are set for that by seeing the pattern of mental illness in their own families as a young child. So it sets their patterns of behavior and could precipitate their developing a mental illness later. The factors are so complex and interrelated. And yes, there can be factors that negative spirituality as part of a history of abuse or part of a trauma can also impact mental health issues in flowering in our congregants. People with mental health problems often need help to get better. They can get better, and many recover completely. The process of recovery has different timelines for different individuals. Here's an example. In the Christian tradition, one of the 7 deadly sins is called acedia, commonly known as sloth or laziness. Anyone been accused of that? You don't have to answer that in the chat. The condition of acedia is a condition characterized by low energy, listlessness, not caring what happens to you or what happens around you. While depression is not exactly identical to acedia, they are close enough that it's really not a stretch for people to think of depression as being a mark of sin. This can be one of those places where myth is promoted as reality. It's also a very important place for faith communities to get out the word that that is not the necessary cause of mental illness. Here's another statement. Would you say it's a myth or would you say it's a fact? I can't do anything for a person with a mental health problem. Myth or fact?
That is looking like overwhelmingly a myth.
I'm so glad those of you on this call recognize you can do something. Absolutely. Friends, family, loved ones, faith families, they can make a difference. Our relationships are powerful modes for resilience in the face of even living with a mental illness or in the face of having a traumatic event that might then prevent that from becoming chronic PTSD, chronic post-traumatic stress disorder. Those relationships are very important. In 2020, only 20% of adults received any mental health treatment in that year. That included 10% of those who received counseling. The other 10% was an alternate form of mental health treatment. Friends and family helped take care of the rest of that population. So it's very important that every individual in our community know that they can help and how they can help. We'll talk more about this in a little bit, but briefly, some ways to help would be reaching out and letting individuals know that you're there for them, helping them find and vet mental health services, helping them find safe people to talk to, and helping them find the real facts about mental health, treating them with respect and care, just like you would other people, and refusing to define them by their diagnosis or label them pejoratively. That's very important. People are not their mental illness. They are persons bravely managing, working with a mental illness. And the last statement for us to talk about, here it is. Once a friend or family member develops mental health problems, he or she will never recover. Myth or fact?
Looks like another myth.
It is indeed. The myth that there is no hope for people with mental health problems is just a total falsity. Studies show that people with mental health problems do get better, and many recover completely. Recovery refers to the process in which people are able to live, work, learn, and participate fully in their communities. There are more treatment services and community support now than ever before, and they do work. When you think about the fact that 1 in 5 Americans in any given year are going to face a struggle with mental health, but only 1 in 20 actually have a mental illness that is a chronic mental illness, like what I mentioned earlier with bipolar depression, anxiety, or schizophrenia, those chronic mental illnesses, and there are others. That's a big difference from 20% that will experience a mental health crisis, and only, what is that? If it's 1 in 20, I can't even do that math. 5% of the community that would actually have a full-blown mental illness, serious mental illness. So definitely a myth. There is hope. And those of us that are participating in these conversations can be part of the hope. So there are other ways that we can educate congregations and communities, linking arms across faith communities with mental health professionals. And that might be to support an understanding of trauma-informed community. And what that really means is that trauma often lies beneath seemingly unrelated problems, and it can show up as a mental illness when it may just be that the person has had egregious experiences that they need a little more care to face and deal with. And when we recognize that what seems to be out of line behavior may be a result of trauma, something happens in our ability to be empathetic and to meet the person with kindness and respect. So spreading that information would be helpful. We could also organize other meetings or places to have those conversations with people in our community, our faith communities. One of Insight's missions is to continue to support congregations and community organizations in the effort to educate about mental health. Abby mentioned some of those ways as we started our talk. Sometimes we do things like webinars. Sometimes we go into congregations and offer a psychoed course on managing grief well, or maybe it's on how do we be alert to prevent suicide? How do we manage and work with congregants who have seriously mental struggles, mental health struggles? We'd be willing to come in and I lost my word. What's the word? Customize. That's the word. Customize an educational forum for a faith community to the need of that faith community. And there are plenty other mental health organizations in the community that do the same thing. We all need to work together to destigmatize and to educate. Another of those 4 ways that we can link arms as faith community and mental health providers is to identify opportunities to support people with mental illnesses. Religious and other community organizations can play important roles in supporting individuals that are bravely living with mental illnesses, encouraging them to stay connected to the resources that help them. This could happen by offering faith communities space for community conversations and community support groups that are focused on addressing mental health issues. For example, AA or Al-Anon, Celebrate Recovery, Depression and Anxiety Support Group, Journey to Freedom group, or any other customized group that your congregation might find helpful. It could be open not just to your congregants, but to other people in the community. providing space is an important way to support opportunities to support people with mental illness. Also, encouraging social participation and inclusion for all people in supportive community programs. Examples of that might be in a peer mentoring program. If a person with a particular mental health issue that may be a difficulty in focusing, a peer mentoring program that would help them really pull together a resume to be able to get a job may be helpful for them. Or maybe opportunities for volunteering that would get a person that is reluctant to get out into the community a reason to get into the community, a purpose for getting into the community and for engaging socially with other people if they can volunteer in a safe, supportive community. Those are a couple of ways, in addition to the education, that we could offer support to people with mental illnesses that faith communities can also participate with mental health communities in doing. A third thing that we could do in linking arms would be to connect individuals and families to help. We can strengthen the connections within your community to mental health services and support and enhance linkages between mental health, substance abuse, disability, and other social services. One way to do that is to have people in faith communities learn the basic signs of mental illnesses and other facts about mental health to encourage those in need to seek help. I thought we would spend a brief moment just listing what are some of those common signs of mental illness in adults and adolescents. This information is coming to you through email, or Abby was going to add it in a link to this form in the chat. It's just a piece that I put together with a bunch of information. But here are some of the symptoms and common signs of mental illness that it's good to just remember. Excessive worrying or fear that gets in the way of everyday life. Feeling excessively sad or low, maybe where it's difficult to get out of bed and go to work, or maybe can't stop crying. Confused thinking or problems concentrating and learning. Extreme mood changes, including uncontrollable highs or feelings of euphoria, as well as those that we mentioned about excessively sad or low. Maybe prolonged or strong feelings of irritability or anger. The anger trigger is just so sensitive. It doesn't take much to flip someone. In some circles, we call that flipping the lid, when your anger button goes off and you say things you wish you hadn't said later. Maybe it's avoiding friends and social activities, or it could be changes in sleep habits, in eating habits, in sex drive, in motivation and desire to participate in things that once were enjoyed. It could also show up in excessive use or abuse of substances like alcohol or drugs, or by continuing to just have one physical ailment after another without obvious causes. You go to the doctor and they can't find a reason for the headaches or the stomach aches or the vague and ongoing aches and pains. That could be a mental health issue that is showing up in the body. We've learned that stress we feel that our emotion shows up in our body and impacts our physical ability to function, especially if we don't put words to that stress. Thinking about suicide is one of those obvious things that, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later on. Some symptoms for young children, a note about that, young children, when they develop mental health conditions, the most obvious symptoms are behavioral. And there again, it's about the change in behavior. That's an important clue. It could be changes in school performance. It could be excessive worry or anxiety when they used to be the happy-go-lucky child. It could be fighting to avoid bed or school where school was something they wanted to participate in. Could show up with hyperactive behaviors, frequent nightmares, frequent disobedience or aggression. It could be frequent temper tantrums. So changes in behavior are the thing to note. Possibly that would be a reason to connect the child and the family with physicians to rule out something going on physically and then find mental health support. So some of the other things that we can do in connecting individuals and families to help are to remind others that people can and do recover and help is available. Sometimes that's all that is needed is a friend to say, wow, you've been anxious for so long. Don't you think it's time to go talk to somebody about that? I've heard that that really helps. Giving a person suffering with a mental health distress or mental health illness hope is always a way to support them. And then you could train key community members, such as adults who work with children, youth, older adults, or veterans, to identify signs of depression and suicide and to refer people to resources. And this was what I mentioned earlier. This becomes a critical moment, and all in our community are responsible for trying to help prevent suicidality, prevent someone from taking their own life. There's the Tennessee Suicide Prevention Network website has many resources about how to have those conversations with people, and training key community members on how to have that conversation is very important. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is a phone number that's out there, 1-800-273-8255. That is also a resource. And you don't wait on doing that if someone is suicidal. So another way that we can offer that the community can step in and connect individuals and families to help is, I lost my place, is by developing relationships with local mental health service providers and other family and youth organizations to help direct individuals and families in need to available services and support in the community. So you notice that a lot of the ways we can help is to make a referral. How do you know when it's appropriate to make that referral? So we've listed those symptoms, the common signs of mental health issues. Really, it's about the level of intensity of those issues. So when you think about some of those symptoms that were behavior cues, if it's a symptom of threat, of suicide, of hurting another, so it's a threat of violence to self or others, or if it's a symptom that the client has become non-functional, you're going to need to refer. That's behavioral cues. Then you have emotional cues, those intense expressions of anger, anxiety, sadness, rapid changes of emotion and mood. You're wondering, who is this showing up today? They were so different yesterday. Maybe that is an important moment to refer. It could be cognitive cues. Your friend is having strange and irrational thoughts, and you're wondering where they're getting this. And when you try to talk about it, they are dead set that those thoughts are reality, and you're not going to talk them out of it. Often that's a delusion, and that could be a symptom of some mental illness going on. Or if your friend is telling you they're seeing things or hearing things or feeling things that you are not seeing, hearing, or feeling, there are no bugs crawling on your skin, or there's nothing that you see on the wall crawling, Maybe they're having hallucinations. That's a very significant cognitive cue that would tell you, let's get you some help. Some professional help is needed. And then those social cues. It's just when our friend, our family member, there's just not enough to be done to help get them to a more stable place. They keep asking for more because they can't figure out how to live life on their own. They may need some help. Or maybe the person is constantly berating or putting down others because they didn't do what they needed or because they did something that offended them. The intensity, the persistence of the symptoms are the clues that say, okay, it's time to refer. So I've mentioned that if a threat of harm to an individual or to others bubbles up, need to act immediately, get them to the closest ER or call the crisis line that I mentioned earlier, 855-274-7471, or call 911. But if you call 911 for a mental health crisis, tell the dispatcher this is a mental health crisis. It will help. They'll send a different team. Connect with family members or physicians or other community support as is needed and as the person will be willing to engage with. Referring to counseling is great. And then enlisting people in the faith community that have a heart of compassion and have the bandwidth in their life and the emotional stability, the emotional strength to be able to help a person that is dysregulated. Those people can be your first line of faith community members that go and offer help and support to the person in your community that's struggling. So I need a breath. I'm pretty sure your ears need a rest. And I'm thinking, this has been a lot of heavy information. We've been talking about everything from a critical incident of distress to a serious mental illness. And I'm just wanting to give you a moment to reflect on what we've talked about. And we've talked about how you could help. I'm sure that there are those listening that are acquainted closely with what a mental health issue looks like. Either it is your own mental health issue or it's someone that you love, someone that you're closely connected to, that you have been watching them suffer. So I want to give you a moment to pause and think about the people in your circle that come to mind. Don't force it. Let it bubble up. I'm going to ask you 2 questions to guide your reflection. And then I'm going to give you a couple of minutes of dead airtime for you to just reflect. And the encouragement is for you to write something. Write it on your phone, write it on a tablet, write it on a piece of paper. Put in words some phrase or answer to these 2 questions. And here are the questions. When you think about yourself or someone else that you are acquainted with closely that suffered with a mental distressing situation or period of time, or that suffers with serious mental illness, how has that experience with this person impacted your life? Question 1. How has that experience with this person impacted your life? I'm going to go ahead and give you the second question. What was helpful or not helpful in your community circle for that person or for yourself? Just going to invite you to write some notes about those 2 questions. If you choose to say anything about that later in the question and answer time, that's totally up to you. The point here is for you to just relax and try to apply the information you've heard. Okay, the invitation now is just to take a breath, a deep cleansing breath, and one more. We only have one more topic to cover, and it's kind of quick, about how mental health practitioners and faith communities can link arms in service of those suffering with mental health issues. And that way is to promote acceptance of those with mental health issues. The voices of leaders and members of faith-based and other community organizations can and do greatly influence attitudes about mental health conditions and attitudes about those who experience them. So how can we promote acceptance of those struggling with mental health issues? We can talk about our own mental health openly. Today's a down day for me. I'm stressed over da 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 da. We could talk about our own openly with friends in faith communities, with people that might need to hear that other people don't have great days every day either. We can also be an example of taking good care of our own mental health by making mental wellness a priority in our life. Here's another opportunity for you to put something in the chat. When I use that term mental wellness, what do you think that means? So the invitation is for you to type a word, a phrase into the chat about what mental wellness looks like to you. And Abby, I would ask you if you would read those out for us as they come in. We'll give you a minute.
A balanced life of ups and downs, sense of positive well-being.
Yeah.
Mental wellness is a sense of peace regardless of current situation.
Oh, yeah.
The ability to handle life's challenges effectively.
Yes.
And knowing that help is available and that we are never helpless.
Yeah. Help is there, and we can have the agency to reach for it. I love these answers.
I have a few more.
Okay.
Being self-aware of what things lessen stress.
Here we go.
Being aware of your state of mind, or being and knowing you are not balanced, so knowing when you're not balanced.
Yeah.
The ability to stay centered despite those ups and downs that we're hearing about. And then knowing myself enough to address times of stress, just as I address medical or dental or vision issues.
Absolutely. Y'all are doing great. My goodness, you guys could teach this class, right? That'd be great. Practicing mental wellness as a foundation for our life is often involves spiritual practices. You think about being aware, self-aware, that's some mindfulness. You think about knowing what helps you and what reduces your stress, that's another way of being self-aware. That's knowing, that's mindfulness. Then some of you mentioned peace and being able to maintain your balance. Those are practices that we can engage with in faith communities, as well as the people that are not participating in faith communities. Mental health affects us all, and mental wellness can be practiced by us all. Another way we can foster acceptance of those struggling with mental illness would be to foster opportunities to build connections with individuals and families who are dealing with mental health challenges. Maybe that is a type of mentor program in a faith community that would just partner that caregiver in the community that has the capacity and the heart for supporting individuals. Maybe it is also a way to foster open talk about mental illness, stress, trauma, related issues, letting that bubble up in all of the meetings that we experience. If it's real, let real happen. So, one of the things that I wanted to leave us with is just thinking about how our spiritual resources and our spiritual personalities, our spiritual practices can impact mental health, is to list some things out of a book of one of my favorite people. This is Russell Seiler Jones and his book, Spirit in Session. He published that in 2019 by Temple Press. And he has a list in that book of healthy spirituality component pieces. I want you to listen for what of these also are generally considered healthy mental health practices. Here they go. Healthy spirituality. It provides deeper access to our humanness. What he means by this is a humble acknowledgement that we are more similar to each other than we are different. Whether we have a serious mental illness, whether we have a disability or not, we're much more similar to each other than different. Another thing that healthy spirituality provides and offers is a sense of identity. Identity formation, identity reformation is often a piece that we deal with in mental health sessions. Healthy spirituality can also offer connection and belonging, especially when it is lived out in community. I heard a pastor recently, it actually was my pastor that recently said, Christianity is not a solo sport. Being a person of faith is not a solo activity. It does need other people to help it grow stronger. We are in this together. Another thing that healthy spirituality brings us is a sense of worth or value. It's innate just because we are. One of the theological foundations in Christianity, which is the religion I'm most familiar with, is that people are made in the image of God. And that innate image of God accrues worth and value to every person, no matter their state or their behavior. Comfort, strength, and meaning when we face suffering is something else that healthy spirituality offers us. Support for positive character traits and secure attachment. Positive character traits here means character traits that are supporting positive behaviors that bring safety, that bring belonging, that bring a willingness to reach out and help another, that then could bring altruism. Those are the positive character traits that are being spoken of. And faith communities generally support those things. Compassion and empathy is another, and it's foundational for healthy spirituality. And a moral compass. Healthy spirituality impacts how we decide we will live our lives. So these gifts of life-breathing, energizing spirituality in the lives of faith community members impacts the mental health of the faith community as a whole. And it can become a light in the larger community. Lastly, spiritually integrated psychotherapists support acceptance of persons struggling with mental health issues through therapeutic practices such as openness and curiosity, compassion, respect, humble challenge, witnessing the struggle, accompanying the client through the struggle, supporting the client's spirituality. When a client has a spiritual wound compounding the mental health concern, clients can be helped to find healing of that wound, often through strengthening their personal spirituality in their therapy sessions. We can link arms with faith communities in the work of helping clients remove barriers to growth in their faith and blocks to genuine connection. In conclusion, mental health practitioners and faith community leaders can link arms in supporting individuals and families experiencing mental health concerns. We can work together to educate the community about mental wellness and about mental health concerns. We can reduce stigma of suffering with a mental illness through open conversations. We can work together to share resources for help, and we can encourage and express empathy in our families, congregations, and communities by conveying a message of acceptance and compassion for those in our midst who suffer with mental health concern.